This video is sponsored by Squarespace. If it was up to the fans to decide how all 10 teams in Formula 1 picked their driver lineups, what would the grid look like? Because 20 drivers is a lot of different personalities to manage, right? Some work well together on track and get along well off it, others don't. Well, I polled 1,292 of you to find out. I've crunched the numbers and put together a 10-team grid of the most popular driver pairings. But before we build that out, I want to look at the top 15, the 15 most requested, most voted for driver pairings, what you think would be the most exciting. Now, there were a few driver pairings that didn't make the top 15, so shout out Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas, 264 votes, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, 288 votes, and George Russell, Alex Albon, 297. Starting with two absolute stalwarts of the sport. In P15 is Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel together. Since Michael Schumacher reigned in the Ferrari, it's Seb in the Red Bull, it's Lewis in the Mercedes have been the two drivers to dominate the sport since, the only two. I think realistically this could have potentially happened. I think early days at Mercedes, obviously Seb went for the Ferrari move. Could there have been a window when Nico Rosberg retired? I don't think Toto Wolff liked the fact that Nico and Lewis didn't seem to get on so well. I think he wanted that harmonious team, and that's exactly what Valtteri Bottas gave. Given Seb was Lewis's closest rival when it came to a title fight in 2017 and 2018, this would have been phenomenal to see. Two top drivers, it would have boiled over because they'd both wanted the championship, and this would have been very exciting. So I very much endorse this take. Well done, everyone. But this is only the 15th most popular as well, so there's plenty more to go. In P14, we have a very topical one at the moment because you lot have said you'd like to see Daniel Ricciardo and Oscar Piastri, the two Australians, in a team together. The old timer who's, done a lot in the past but struggling at the minute, the new blood coming through who's probably going to be taking his seat. But rather than Piastri Norris, which is what it's looking like it's going to be, you lot want to see him go head to head with Daniel Ricciardo. That would be phenomenal vibes. What I would say though, even more pressure on Daniel Ricciardo to perform. I guess pressure on both. You got to say, you look at this driver pairing with all the noise around Piastri at the minute, like whatever happens, Piastri is going to be under massive pressure. But then for Ricciardo, if Piastri comes in and does a job on him, then that doesn't look very good either. P13, 13th pick. This one kind of caught me by surprise because I didn't really consider it. But I think when you look into it and you think a bit more about it, it kind of makes sense. You lot have said Zhou Guanyu and Yuki Tsunoda as teammates. Now look, I look at these two drivers. I think Yuki's got the higher ceiling, but I think Zhou is a more consistent pair of hands. I mean, last time these two were head to head was 2020 in the F2 season. Yuki finished third with 200 points and Zhou finished sixth with 151. So not a massive amount in it. Plus having a Japanese and a Chinese driver together, I think given that North Asian region, two drivers for that audience to fully get behind as well could be really exciting. So I think it kind of makes sense. Who do you think could come out on top? Let me know in the comments below. And yes, I know none of these driver pairings are real or even realistic necessarily, but you know what is real? Great segue, Tommo. Today's video sponsor, Squarespace, because they can allow you to build your very own beautiful, real website. Whether it's a portfolio, a blog, an e-commerce website, doesn't matter, Squarespace has got your back. In fact, they've just launched a brand new website editor, all drag and drop, called Fluid Engine. I mean, just look at this. Look at how good that all looks. And look at how easy it is to just drag stuff around, mate. It's a breeze. And look, there's no coding at all. There's just beautiful images and text. It's the dream. You can try Squarespace completely free of charge. It's only when you want to put the website you've made live to the world that you have to pay anything. And when that time inevitably, because of course it's going to come around, because you're going to love it, head to squarespace.com/TommoF1 and save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. 12th on this list. I'm surprised this one isn't higher because there's a lot of nationalistic takes here. There's a lot of, two drivers from the same country in a team. And Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz are 12th on this list. Although to be fair, the votes are very tight here. I only got 4 more votes than Zhou and Tsunoda. But obviously an all Spanish team. Fernando was Carlos's hero growing up. To see them two together, they've clearly got a fantastic relationship. Kind of Fernando's a bit of a mentor, I feel like, for Carlos. Bring the man from Madrid and the man from Oviedo together would be lovely. Although I will say, because I think both of them have got it in them to be a bit feisty with their teammates. I think this one would come to blows. I actually think this would come to blows. Carlos would be wanting to prove a point as much as Alonso would want to be proving a point, fighting for that title of King of Spain. And I think this would bubble over actually a few times. 11th on this list with 3 more votes than the previous. It's a throwback to 2007. Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton together again. It couldn't have boiled over much more last time they were together, so I think this one is purely vibes. Obviously, look, they're both at much later stages of their careers. They're both very different human beings, I think, to who they were back then. Both big personalities, both wear their hearts on their sleeves. I would love to see this. But then with 2 more votes than that, in P10, a driver pairing we haven't ever seen, it's Fernando Alonso and Sebastian Vettel. Now, obviously, again, during the kind of Vettel domination period, it was Fernando who kind of came closest in 2010 and 2012. Fernando had some choice words about Seb at the time as well, very much kind of down and basically saying it's all the car, which, I mean, read into that what you will. I feel like their relationship now, though, is a lot better than it once was. They definitely didn't have a good relationship back in the day. But again, they've both grown a lot as characters. Obviously, Seb's retiring at the end of the year, but we had to keep him in for this one. And clearly their motivation is very different. I've got to say, just purely based on motivation right now, I think you would get more out of Fernando than Sebastian, because Fernando is clearly, he's got a chip on his shoulder, Fernando. There's a reason he's sticking around for as long as he is to try and get a 3rd world title, because he thinks he deserves more. I don't think Sebastian, and clearly by the fact that he's retiring, is motivated in the same way as Fernando is. But who do you think will come out on top? 9th on this list, 342 votes, went to Carlando. Bringing the boys back together. We saw them together in 2019. And in 2020, clearly get on like a house on fire, and clearly both driving at a very, very high level right now. If I had to pick between 2, it's hard because, you know, Carlos has got a race-winning car. Lando's never had that, so it's very difficult to rate them. And even their seasons together, I feel like performance-wise, they were always very, very close. I think McLaren must clearly be kicking themselves given how poor Daniel's performances have been for letting Carlos go in the first place. Although, again, that Ferrari pool, I think most drivers are going to go if that opportunity arises. And look, at the end of the day, Ferrari have given Carlos again, race-winning car now. He's got his first race win, whereas McLaren still can't do that for Lando. So I get it from Carlos's point of view. I think McLaren, if they'd have kept hold of Carlos Sainz, they'd be in a much stronger place right now, to be honest. Votes jump up a little bit here, and this one I'm super surprised is only 8th on this list, right? Because this was the one I immediately thought of when I decided to make this video. This was the first driver pairing that I kind of attached my idea to, right? And it's Verstappen and Alonso, because there's all this talk of, you know, Gasly and Albon and Checo struggling relative to Max in this very pointy front end car. But Fernando loves a pointy front end car, and not many people can drive like Fernando Alonso. He is one of the greatest to ever do it, I think, in terms of pure driver talent. And to put him in this Red Bull alongside Max Verstappen, if I could pick any driver pairing to just do for one weekend, just any 2 drivers together, I would put Verstappen and Alonso in those Red Bulls just to see how close Fernando could get. And then P7 is one that I'm not surprised came up because it's a drama one. And it's, of course, Nico Hülkenberg and Kevin Magnussen, which all obviously stems back to when Kevin famously told Nico to suck his balls. That's quite generous offering, isn't it? I don't know why people read into it negatively. Look, that was a long time ago, all right? When even was that? 2017 Hungarian Grand Prix. I've got an article from Autosport that said they've moved on from this, okay? They've moved on from this incident. Yes, it was funny. But actually, I do think they're 2 drivers. I think Magnussen is the better driver, I think. If there was a new team coming in and they wanted 2 really experienced, solid drivers, I think Magnussen Hülkenberg would be a really appealing little driver lineup. I can't lie. It's not maybe one for the future. I mean, they're not that old, but they're not young either. But I think most teams would be pretty happy with a Hulk Magnussen driver lineup, in my opinion. Okay, for 6th place, the votes jump up big time now. 539 votes. You like the sound of Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc at the same team, which, I mean, obviously, that would be sick. They're the 2 title protagonists this year. I mean, Charles should be more of a protagonist if it wasn't for Ferrari, but we won't get into that again. I do think Max has the edge on Charles for sure. I think Charles still needs to kind of iron out a few of these overdriving mistakes. But on Charles' day, he can beat Max. There is no doubt in my mind. And in terms of going forward, this next generation of Formula One, this next 10 years, I think Verstappen, Leclerc are the two most exciting prospects. Maybe other drivers can knock on the door, but right now, going forward, it's Verstappen, Leclerc's era, I think. Although the next two drivers might have something to say about that, because P5 in your list, with 556 votes, is George Russell and Lando Norris. Full British bias. Absolutely. Come on, England. Have some of that. The man from King's Lynn. The man from Bristol. I don't even call them men. They're kids. Yet they're lighting up the F1 world. George has done a fantastic job. You know how well I think George has done since he jumped into that Mercedes. Lando is carrying on from where he left off. The only driver outside of those top three teams to get a podium so far this year, I think, speaks volumes. This would be an unreal lineup. They get along really well off camera. I wonder how that would be tested. We've seen kind of an angry, cutthroat side from George. We haven't really seen that too much from Lando yet. Not so much like with other drivers. He's been harsh on himself, like Russia, for example, when he was distraught. Because I actually think in terms of talent, they're pretty equal. It's the mentality, it's the head game. And I do wonder who would come out on top. I've got to say that I'll probably say Russell. For as long as I've been doing F1 YouTube, I've dreamt of having a high production guest filled F1 race watch along, and we're finally here. Subscribe to The Last Lap. You won't regret it. And then another 7 votes ahead, and I mean, maybe it's my fault because I did do a video all about why these two historically don't get along. Who knows where their relationship is now? I'm assuming it's in a better place. It's Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly, the all-French lineup. I've talked about this at Alpine for time. It seems like it's not going to happen. I'd be surprised if Otmar didn't make a call to Gasly and try and maybe come up with something, because you've got to think with that seat becoming vacant. I think Gasly, Ocon, again, I think they're very similar level drivers. Yes, they've got history where they didn't get along and they had a few incidents and who knows what else happened behind the scenes. But one thing we've got to remember with F1, yes, you might not all be teammates, right? But you're still spending a lot of time with all these other drivers. There's a lot of opportunities to talk and to iron out your differences, more so than if you just didn't see them again for years. I would be fully on board with an Allez Bleu Alpine with Gasly, with Ocon. Doesn't seem like it's going to happen, but you lot clearly have the dream as well. Top 3 time. I can't believe these have wiggled their way with 125 votes more than an Ocon and Gasly pairing. You lot want to see Lance Stroll and Nicholas Latifi, the two Canadians. I'm sensing a trend here. Drivers of the same nationality together. Go Tiffy, Sir Lancelot together. Now, first and foremost, there's no doubt in my mind that Stroll would quite significantly beat out Latifi. To that, I have little doubt. But would it be fun to see? Sure. Would the team have a lot of money? Yes. 2 billionaire fathers coming together for the super moneymaker team. Safina, Lavazza, Aston Martin, you got all the logos everywhere, right? I'm sure they could buy a few extra horsepower. And especially after they crashed into each other in Australia as well, which was kind of ridiculous. But again, at least they'll have the money to fix any problems. Doesn't matter. Okay, the second most exciting, most popular choice for an F1 driver pairing with 695 votes. Only 18 votes fewer than number 1 as well. It's Mick Schumacher and Sebastian Vettel. It is super nice, like given the context around Michael specifically, where, you know, it's really sad. He hasn't had that father figure in his kind of adult career. Yet Seb has stepped into that role, was almost acting how Michael did when Seb was coming through the ranks and really kind of took Seb under his shoulder. Sebastian's like returning that favour. And it is genuinely heartwarming. Like you'll see these little messages and you're like, oh, it's nice they're looking out for each other. But when you really think about it, the role that Sebastian's choosing to take in Mick's career and his life surrounding F1, I'm sure to an extent as well. It is super nice to see. These two together would be great. It was a bit cringe at Miami when they crashed into each other. Well, Mick crashed into Seb. That was a bit awkward afterwards. But you know what? Sometimes you got to learn these lessons the hard way, Mick. I'm not sure in what capacity, but going forward, Sebastian takes some kind of role in it, whether it's like manager maybe, or just works with him in some kind of capacity, just to kind of be there and just be a supporting arm even when he retires, because I think that relationship's really important to kind of both of them. But as wholesome as it is, those two, the most wholesome pair, is followed by what would probably be, especially after last year, the least wholesome pair. I think I could probably say it. I think you can probably guess which two drivers we haven't put together yet. But it would be vibes. It would be drama. It would be fascinating to see, again, especially after how last year panned out, how these two would work together in the same team. I am, of course, talking all about Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. Greatest of all time is an impossible kind of metric, but I do have kind of a top three in no particular order, and it's Jim Clark, it's Alain Prost, and it's Lewis Hamilton. Kind of three different eras that they cover, right? But you look at the way Max is going, how early his career has started. You know, he still needs to put more years in. But if his career carries on this current trajectory, especially now that he's in a winning car, you got to say that Max is going to make himself a contender for the GOAT debate at the end of his career. But yeah, these two together would be mad. The infighting amongst, well, obviously F1 Twitter would be a joke. Toto Wolff would never facilitate this. Absolutely not. Although, one thing, right? Because when you look back as to why Red Bull put Max into a Toro Rosso at 17 years of age, they've said it on record, that was in part because other teams were sniffing, and one of those teams sniffing was Mercedes. If Red Bull hadn't given Max the opportunity to drive in a Toro Rosso, you do wonder if Mercedes has snapped him up. Could this have been a thing? Would Mercedes have essentially done to Max Verstappen what they did to George Russell, put him into, you know, a feeder team like Williams, grow him, and then replace Bottas with this new driver coming in? If cards have fallen in a different direction, that very much would have happened. But just imagine that. Like, imagine thinking of Max Verstappen in the same way we think of George Russell. It doesn't feel right, does it? It just doesn't feel right, not after last year. So that's your 15. Now let's put them into a 10-team grid. Now, of course, there were a lot of duplicate names, so I'm prioritising the driver pairings that got the most votes, right? So obviously, straight in, Team A, it's Hamilton, it's Verstappen. Team B, Schumacher Vettel. Team C, Stroll Latifi. Team D, Ocon Gasly. Team E, Norris Russell. F is Magnussen Hulkenberg. G, Fernando Alonso Carlos Sainz. H, Joe Tsunoda. I is Piastri Ricciardo, and Team J is Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas. 10 teams, 20 drivers, done, and Albon... Why is Alex here? Where's Alex? Alex! That's my 2023 F1 grid on pure vibes. What do you think? Who would you be standing for out of these 10 teams? Cheers for watching. Thank you for giving me your time. Thank you again to Squarespace for sponsoring and supporting what I do. Don't forget to check out the last lap this weekend. My name is Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.